Everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Marriage is Tougher Than Woodpecker Lips podcast. This is Brian.
And I'm Paul. We'd like to welcome you to a community meant for the men of the world to share our thoughts and perspectives on marriage.
We can learn from each other's experiences and help each other be better husbands. Now, let's get right into the show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. For those who have been listening for a while, thank you. And if you're new, hi. Today, this episode, we are going to talk about the all-defensive team, how being defensive as a husband can spill over from one area to a lot more areas than we'd like, and that effect it can have on your marriage.
We'd also like to invite you to link up with us on our socials, searching Marriage is Tougher on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can also link up with us on marriagestougher.com, where you can request to be a guest, give us topic ideas, ask questions. If you would like to be a guest, fill out a short form. We'll qualify you to be on the show. Ultimately, we're just going to ask you a couple questions and get that ball rolling. Maybe you can get a little bit of coaching. But outside of that, let's get this show on the road.
All right. So, all defensive team. I think the idea is a little self-reflection and seeing where we've grown in this area and maybe where we haven't. Just being defensive in general doesn't solve a lot in life, much less your marriage. So when you think about all defensive team, right, it's sports reference, just those dudes that are, lock down corners, make all the tackles, stop anybody, in basketball or, any position, right? They're running at you in soccer, you're doing what you need to do to hold it down, which is a good thing. But in marriage, being super defensive is not that great of a thing. When I talk about, or when we say being defensive in marriage, what do you think about, Brian?
Just as you were talking, it made me think, you shall not pass, right? You have your walls up, and it feels like you're trying to protect yourself from something. And I mean, I'm definitely on the all-pro team for that. I just went through it last night, if I'm being completely honest. It's really kind of funny because I'll have an easier time of talking to you about it, but when it comes to Christmas time for me, it's kind of like this trauma that I'm reliving, and I'm trying to be better about it for the sake of my children and my wife. But it is really a huge struggle for me to just enjoy Christmas the way most people do. Right. And because we haven't necessarily had a deep conversation about it, my wife doesn't understand. And why would she? Right. But for me, every time she starts asking me questions about why I have this adverse reaction to everything Christmas, the memories of those things start coming up, and then I just tend to go on lockdown. I'm like, nah, I'm just going to be over here angry in the corner. You know what I mean? And then, she's trying to pull things out of me. And, it's like typical story, man. I put up my walls and I'm just there blocking all the shots, protecting my ribs. You know what I mean? And, she's getting frustrated and, and like you said, it leaks into other things, right? Like, so she could be, so ultimately what happened is just last night, she's trying to solve a problem that she can't understand what it is. So how could she possibly solve the problem? And in my mind, I'm like, just move on because you're not coming in here. Which I understand that I shouldn't be doing that. But again, this is like a trauma area for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm still trying to work through it myself. And I'm not prepared to tackle that with her just yet. So it was a tough go of it. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for sharing, right? Thank you for that space of vulnerability. You said a couple things, immediately, about walls and being guarded. And I just visually seeing like those things just happening, just bloop, bloop, like super fast wall build, like in Minecraft or something, like speed version. You're watching like a YouTube video, just pops up and it's there. And, thinking of an MMA fighter, like trying to block, all the things when you said blocking the ribs and all that. And a lot of times we're defensive and it's a perceived attack, but it's not even a real attack, right? Your wife is not coming at you with trying to give you body blows. Like she's trying to solve a problem that she's not equipped to because you haven't given her that space to yet. Mm-hmm. So she doesn't even know how deep it is. Right.
Right.
And I think a lot of times our defensive-ness, it stems from something else. And then whoever we're being defensive with, like they either don't see it coming, they don't understand why it's happening, or they're just living life, not even know that we're having a defensive reaction in our being.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is tough because I see how it's affecting her. And by all means, I would love to just be able to snap myself out of it, but to your point where you said it kind of leaks into other areas, more or less, it sometimes, even though I know it's not her attacking my defenses, right? I feel like to some extent, if I give up some of my ground, then I'm going to be forced to talk about the things I don't want to talk about or that I'm not ready to talk about. Right. So then those defenses stay up and then she can completely change the subject, but I'm still being defensive because I'm like, no, this is just a tactic. Like you're going to circle back and make me re-experience something that I don't want to feel right now. You know what I mean? And listen, I get it. That is not fair to her. And it's something that I'm trying to work through. I, at this moment, simply can't do it.
Yeah, so I did not see this going this way. Here for it all the time. There is, obviously for this specific situation, there's a couple ways you can do it, right? I know you said you can't, face it right now. You don't feel like you're equipped. One, I don't know if your therapist is available during the holidays or it's hard to get in or whatever, but maybe that's a good resource to try to get in before. I mean, at the time of recording, it's literally like a week away. So,
Right.
So I don't know if that's going to happen. 2, you can try to dive in it without the guidance or of the tools of the therapist and see how that goes. 3, you really monitor yourself and push through this season and then attack it after this season, right? Like talk to your therapist or just talk about it as it's not the holiday season. So because the holiday season, like whenever you have a trauma response, like you don't want to be back in that situation and talking about it at the same time, because then it's like double the trauma, right? So if you guys can, maybe sometime in January, just go out or something, or go somewhere out of the house and just talk about it. It would probably be easier for you to talk about, as it's not actively happening to you as well.
Yeah. And that's where I'm at. The suggestion I made, and ideally where I would like to be, is to have us both have a session. And I think that creates a second layer of accountability for me to just put it out there. Right. And for whatever reason, it feels less threatening to have that third party in the room while I'm trying to, deep dive into something like this. So with that being the case, again, it is tough, like you said, to do that at this time of year for me. And especially if it's just the two of us trying to hash this out. So the third thing you said is definitely where I'm at, where I'm, like you said, monitoring my reactions to certain things and more or less just trying to fight my way through them without that sour look all over my person, right? Because her idea for the season is that, we're supposed to be creating positive memories for the kids and for the family. I get that 100%. I don't want my problems to become the kids' problems.
Right.
Right. I don't, how to say this? I've already started to get questions from the kids, like, are you going to like participate in X, X, Y, and Z? And my problem is I can't even fully explain it to myself why I struggle to participate in certain things. I just know that it's painful, and I'm just like, ugh, I'm gonna back off for a little bit, But if I put myself in their shoes, their perspective is like, Daddy just doesn't want to be here right now with us. So trying to fight through that.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, it's right on par with what we're saying, which is why it's such a great example. There's so many layers to being defensive, right? We may think it's just one small thing, but it can essentially be deeper, right? And yours is an obvious one that you understand and know, but mine can be something totally different. Like, I'm totally having a good day, and then something comes back, and it's like, wait, why did I just react like that? What am I doing? But a lot of times I don't catch it, and then it's like, oh, this happened. Just like you said, like, I'm defensive for this one thing, and we're totally moved on. Ideally, like in a regular world, we're just changing conversations. But after that, it's like, okay, my guard's still up. Like, what's going to happen? Like, my body is still reacting to what was happening before, and my brain is not letting me fully dive into the next thing without thinking everything's suspect. And I think as you recognize, I mean, it's tough if you're not trying to be self-aware to even kind of get better or figure out ways to stop it as you see it happening. Because, I mean, we all get defensive, but it's like, how soon can you reset yourself? Resetting is so important when talking about being defensive, for sure. Because once you feel attacked, you could be on guard for a while. But if you can figure out how to push through it, then, that defensive time is mitigated significantly.
Yeah. And I think that's a place I struggle as well, resetting, right? Like, I'm so good at being defensive that I could legitimately just lock down for a week at a time and push through the other areas of my life and just still have that wall there, right? Again, which I realize is unfair. And I see how it is affecting the family, right? And, so this goes to say that I did make a promise to my wife that I would try to be better about these things. And that is also to say that I am trying to be better about them. The issue is, if I make any progress, she wants more. Right? So it's like, in my mind, I could say, all right, I'm willing to meet you here. Right? And then she like backs up and the gap gets bigger. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I'm not ready to go that far. You feel me? And so then it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, that sort of deal. Like, so I'll meet her there. She backs up, and then I'm like, wait, now I got to back up because I don't know if that's a better way to visualize it for people, but it's like a retreat, I guess.
No, that makes sense. It's almost, it makes sense in the process of our brains, right? Because you go to meet and you push through and you're somewhere, and then you see the line has moved. So you're actually now kind of backing up and reassessing, like, wait a minute, like, am I going to move forward now? Am I going to stay back here? Am I going to stay where I am? How do I feel that the line moved? Like, you're trying to process all these things at once. And when we're talking about, that's the thing, when we're talking about trauma, it's such a process, and things don't always happen quickly, right? So using this example, right, you guys have a session, you talk it out, in mid-January, end of January, it's cool. But you really won't see the effects of that for another 350 days or, 400 days till it's Christmas again. And you're like, oh, okay, let's see if this works. But it's a process.
Yeah.
And
it's definitely a process. And thank you for bringing that up, because I know that it's not going to be, something quick that I'll be able to just get over or whatever. And, having that reminder that those buttons might not be pushed for a whole nother year. I don't want to be out of practice. Mm-hmm. Right. So that reminder of, hey, maybe we should check in every once in a while, especially when October, November roll around, just to make sure, everything's on par for whatever progress we did make. Right. Because I definitely don't want to regress. The kids are only little for so long. Mm-hmm. But one thing I do want to say is it seems in my mind right now that it's a lot easier for me to bring this up with you. But that is also to say that I've not necessarily said anything about what the trauma is. So,
right.
You know what I mean?
I was about to say, we haven't really addressed anything. Like, we're just talking about the theoretically how to get over it and what it is. So that also is different. I don't know if you guys had even a conversation like this, but it's definitely, like you said, when you're not talking about the thing, you're talking like about the things about the thing. It can be an easier conversation. But once you lean into what it actually is, that opens all the doors.
Yeah. There's, more or less it's just an entry point. But short of walking through that door. The door might be open. You still got to walk through it. So,
yeah, I mean, just there's many facets of why we are defensive. And it can be things that we hold dear to, like it's maybe things that we think we do very well, or that we do very well, and someone may want to push us to be better, but we're defensive about this area because maybe other areas of our lives aren't as together. So like, this is the one thing that I'm doing well. Please don't come and poke holes in this, because this is the one thing I love. I know, at least if nothing else, this is good. And just like we talked about a couple weeks ago, like, good is the enemy of great. So if we're trying to be great as husbands, like, we have to be able to recognize when we can be better. And again, it's like a self-aware, not that we're not always ready. I think sometimes we're not ready. And then that initial reaction to defend just happens. But if you can, again, push through that, recognize it's happening, or even after you have, a stint of being defensive, like, evaluate, like, why did that happen? And next time, how can I stop it from happening? Those are some ways that you can mitigate, and reduce those bouts of being defensive and stopping it from spilling over to other areas. I mean, I was just thinking, like, in basketball, right? Like, once you get into a defensive stance, like, it's almost awkward to just stand straight up. Right? Like, your knees are bent and all that stuff, your hands are out. Like, to just stand straight up and, like, walk off the court would be weird. So, like, it's a gradual thing to move. So, like, your posture is, like, you're just always ready. Like, what's the next thing that I can defend? Like,
yeah.
And it can spill over for sure if you don't catch yourself.
Yeah. I wrote down the word exposure. And that is basically what we're talking about here, right? These potentially past wounds get exposed. Like Paul was just saying, your potential weakness in a certain area might get exposed, right? So that's what we're talking about, poking holes in the things that we feel that we're good at. But what exposure provides for you is number one, the ability to confront yourself about the things you need to improve on, right? Because you might know there's a weakness there, but until it gets exposed and you see what the actual effects of the weakness are, either it be to you, to your family, whatever it is that you're trying to correct, you're much less likely to do anything about it unless it gets exposed, right? So this conversation that my wife and I had last night at least pointed out some things to me about how what is happening within me is affecting her and the family. And then second to that, it also allowed me to really sit and think about what are the things that are hurting me, right? So I had to confront them a little bit while I'm sitting there and, speaking with my wife. And it gave me a little bit of direction on some of the work I need to do, right? Which is helpful. It might burn a little bit in the beginning. But, you can remember being a kid and your parents saying, "Hey, we're going to put a little bit of this liquid on here. It'll be all right." The brown bottle, you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to clean out the wound a little bit. But yeah, man, it's a necessary step in the process.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, exposure. That just can mean so many things.
Mm.
But it's necessary. Absolutely. Well, I think we're coming up on time.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say as far as defensive or on this topic?
I mean, going into this episode, knowing what just happened last night, I still didn't expect this episode to go this way. I'm glad it did. And I mean, all I can say is I really hope that it helps somebody out there. Because as I talk through my stuff, as Paul talks through his stuff, you know, our real hope is one, that we become better, but showing the men out there that we're willing to talk about it and have conversations about it, and hopefully eventually show you the results of us being able to talk about it now will keep you coming back, right? Hopefully encourage you to have conversations and, you know, deal with the things that we're ultimately hiding behind walls, right? We find it easy sometimes to talk about becoming a better business person, or, you know, becoming a better athlete, or, you know, all those things that take practice. But when it comes to things related to emotion, we tend to hide a little bit further behind that wall than we should. So yeah, that's all I got on the topic before this makes me start bleeding.
Well, I appreciate your vulnerability, and thank you for using this space as a way to help others get better. And as we wrap up, you know, if this episode helped you in any way, please let us know on any of our social channels, you know, just searching Marriage is Tougher. Leave a message or a comment at our website, marriagestougher.com. We really want this to be a community. We're building a community. So you can be a part of it. Just reach out on any of those mediums, and we will reach back out, and you can reach out to each other on those platforms as well, and just have a good conversation on what this episode meant to you, or what it means to be a good husband, or anything like that. Like, we just want to foster a space that's safe for us to talk about the things that we may not talk amongst ourselves, and, you know, really let us all know we're not alone in trying to be better husbands. So for that, we just thank you for this episode. We'll check you next time.
Peace.